Hey, pull up a chair and welcome back to PR After Hours. I am Alex Greenwood, your virtual bartender, if you will, at this happy hour where we offer you a cocktail of weekly tips on public relations, marketing, and some business management stuff thrown in. Today's a special episode. I went on site to iWorks Gladstone in Gladstone, Missouri, which is right in the Kansas City metro area. iWorks is a co-working space. It's huge. It's one of several owned by the iWorks brand, and I had the privilege and pleasure to sit down with Bob Martin, one of the entrepreneurs who started iWorks, and we talked for about an hour about a ton of stuff related to his career and creativity and marketing. And I thought I would share a little bit of that with you here on the PR After Hours podcast. What we're going to share with you is a little bit of the interview where he talks about the value of storytelling and a couple of other little tips that I've cut from that previous interview. So if you want to hear the entire interview, I'll put a link in the show notes. It's on a different program called Mysterious Goings On that I also host, and it's a fun show. It's a little more about creativity and a little more about people's lives and their careers is all wound into that. So, but this being basically a cocktail of tips and stuff to help you with your business, I thought I'd focus on the specific parts from the interview with Bob that will cover that. So I hope you will, right after this, take a good listen to Bob Martin talking about a few marketing tips that I think could be beneficial to you. And I'll be right back at the end of the show to let you know what's going on next here on PR After Hours. Hey, what's shaking? It's Alex Greenwood, host of PR After Hours here on Anchor FM. You know, I've been podcasting off and on since 2006, and I've got to tell you something. Back in the old days when it was all stone knives and bear skins and a string and Dixie cups, podcasting was a real challenge. Fast forward to today, and it's still got a lot of challenges, especially for folks who don't have time to set up a home studio or go to a studio or things like that. So I found Anchor FM and I love it, love it, love it for how easy it is to create my own podcast here on this channel called PR After Hours. I love how you can put everything together so simply right from your desktop or your phone. And there's so many great creation tools that allow you to record and edit your pod right there. And I just can't recommend that part alone enough. Also, though, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from this too with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. That's the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And we'll see you back at PR After Hours. Really interesting.
Yeah, I've had a fun life. I spent the better part of a decade working in sports marketing. So I worked with Hall of Fame athletes. I used to joke because I would go in and talk about what I did to my children's classmates, and even when they were in high school. And I was talking about people like Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams that I worked with, and Rod Carew and Wayne Gretzky, and these kids' eyes were just glassed over. They had never heard of these people. So I realized I had aged somewhat. But I had a really good time doing that. We were licensed by the all the four major sports, and again with those constraints, you figure out how to be creative and operate within the licenses and the rights that you have to use these likenesses and these trademarks. And so on top of that, it was a great gig. It was I've always been a big fan of small business, and that's what this was. This was a startup. I was the number 3 employee. We built it up, and we sold it. We were in Huntington Beach, California. We sold it to a company out of Philadelphia. I tell people the height of my sales career was when I convinced my wife that South Jersey was the same as Southern California. So we went off and we went in that direction. My dad thought the only way the job could have been better if we'd had a beer tap in my office, and so I tried to make that happen. But it was a real good run, a real enjoyable time. And after that, I went to work for. I was in charge of marketing for the Thomas Kinkade Company, the famous painter of light, and did that for a couple of years. And that was a real interesting sociological experience. It was an experiment and experience.
Really?
But yeah, and so I had some really great opportunities there. I got to work with the likes of 60 Minutes. We did a a program with them that Mike Wallace was doing the interviews with Tom, and Mike Wallace is a big traditional American artist, so he was just lobbing up softballs, and Tom was putting them out of the park, and we cued it so that the 60 Minutes episode ran right after we got Tom to be on the board of directors with the Salvation Army, and so he broke open the kettlebell ringing that particular Thanksgiving on the Dallas Cowboys football show, and
Ooh.
3 nights later we had him on the 60 Minutes episode, and that following week our sales were just through the roof. So it was a real marketing coup, but it was a good time, and left there, started my own company, and did some fun things with that, and then in 2005, that was still in Northern California. We were working with Thomas in a small town called Morgan Hill, California, just south of San Jose, and then we moved back here into the Kansas City area in 2005. Been here since.
So this is interesting to me on a creative level. You went from sports marketing to art marketing. I mean, was there a big difference? You know what I mean? Was it widgets versus widgets? Was it leveraging a brand is the same thing no matter where it's from?
Not too much, because most of the products that we were creating in the art community, in the sports community, were artistically related, so lithographs and figurines and things of that nature that replicated these artists. And I also worked for the M.I. Hummel Company. If some of the older congregation might be listening.
The figurines.
That was the one by the famous nun in Germany. And so I made a whole career really out of marketing things that people have absolutely no need for. So in that way, much of it was the same. The thing I think I learned from a little bit from M.I. Hummel, but certainly from the sports world, and then translated specifically to the arts world with Tom, is that it's really easy to market something when there's a story attached to it.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that coming over here today, is that, the really strong businesses have two things. They have a good business foundation and they have a great story.
Yeah.
And when those two are aligned or can intertwine, it's amazing what can happen. And so that helped, obviously, with the sports marketing and the athletes. They've all created their own stories. They have had their careers, they're Hall of Famers. They've had moments within those Hall of Fame careers that stand out. I think about Ted Williams hitting a home run in his last at bat, and I was a Roberto Clemente fan of his tragic death. We just saw it recently with Kobe Bryant, and we're seeing all the highlights in his career, but with an understanding that we all are sort of mortal. But when you have these stories that you can tell that resonate with consumers, it's so much easier to market. And honestly, I'll say that when you have constraints, it's easier to market. It defines parameters. I have a joke as a journalist by education. No writer can write without a deadline. And I think
100%.
I think that's true with creatives. I work with a lot of artists, and my grandmother was an artist of some renown, and I just saw her, and if she could take forever on a project if there wasn't like this time limit. So,
Right.
But when there was a time limit, and she knew sizes, and she did a big backdrop for the Globe Theater in Minnesota for a Shakespearean play. I don't recall which one it was, but it was a triptych that she had to do that was about 16 feet tall and about 8 feet wide each panel. And she had a deadline on that, and it was fantastic. The stuff that she put out for that particular project was fantastic. But if she had an art show coming up, it was the day before the art show. She was cranking out 5 or 6 new pieces.
I love that though about the deadline, and that's something we can all, whether you're artistic or creative in general, we all need our deadlines. But that is so true. I'm also, just like you, former journalism, got that background. Yeah, that's true. I mean, if they said, well, I got a feature, it's due in a week or so, well, I got started on that feature about 2 days out, maybe, it just happens.
Certainly I wouldn't cast aspersions because I'm as indictable as anyone. But it is kind of a shame, and I think that's where the great ones get their greatness, is that I don't know that they still take advantage of the time that they're allotted to do these projects, but in that last hour, what they put out is just inspiring.
I think we can all agree that Bob had some really good points there about storytelling and just some general stuff about marketing that might be helpful to you. Again, if you want to hear the complete interview with Bob, just check the show notes here, but it's over at Mysterious Goings On. It's a weekly podcast that a little more artsy than businessy, but I think you'll find some good stuff on there that will be helpful to you. If nothing else, it might be a fun diversion. But here we go. Our happy hour is about at an end here. We've got stuff to do. Just wanted to invite you to let me know what you think about this podcast. You can reach me through alexgpr.com. The link will be in the show notes. Happy to put a link in there, and then you can contact me through that page if you have questions or if you need a consultation. We do offer a free 30-minute consultation on the phone. Typically, depending on what it is you're looking for. It's got to be something, of course, that we do and we can help you with in general, but if that's the case, we're happy to set up a quick call and find out if we can do more for you. And of course, if you're really enjoying the tips you're finding here on this show, we've got a little link in the show notes where you can support this podcast with a monthly donation to help us bring you future episodes. It's not much. There's several options, and anything you can do helps out. It just helps give us a little incentive to keep going and helps pay hosting fees, stuff like that. All right? Well, again, I hope you enjoyed your cocktail tip this week. I really appreciate Bob Martin from iWorks joining us, and I hope you'll join us next week, your next cocktail from PR After Hours.